This conference will now be recorded.
Cool. So we are here. There is a particular section, elastic block storage. Can you see my screen, guys, now?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes,
So
yes.
there is a particular option known as life cycle manager. So using this life cycle manager, we can set up our backup policy, and moreover, we can maintain it properly. So first of all, let us say description, maybe data backup. So now there are two options, whether you want to take backup of individual volume or you want to have some instance enabled. Fine. So why you want to have this? You can easily pick out of this, like complete instance including all the volume associated with it, or any individual instance only. You can pick. So I'm going to pick here instance only. So I'm going to say name and maybe interview. The machine which I have created that says the name as interview. So I have created that. Now I will add tags if I want to have additional tag backup hourly or whatever name you want. Then I will schedule name data backup. So this is going to be data backup part. Now run every. So this says from 1 hour to every 24 hours. What is going to be frequency of your backup? Like when you want to have an incremental snapshot, you can maintain it. So when it is supposed to be started, so obviously there is no such time, there is no such feature that we can change this particular UTC time to IST. But obviously, like if you want to enable it every 1 hour, so you don't care that when it is supposed to be running. You need to ensure that when it will start. So if you need to start immediately, you can convert 9 AM UTC to IST. Whatever time will come, you can edit it here. Then after, for the very first time, this particular time window will make a difference. Otherwise, it will be default. Because if we are going to run every 1 hour, so that doesn't matter. Very first time, it will run based on this particular time, and after that, every 1 hour. So we can leave it like this. So retention type. Retention type means count or days, or you can call it age. For example, there is a policy that you want to have 7 days backup. Fine. So age is 7, like interval 7 days, maybe weeks, maybe years, or whatever. You can ensure this thing that your backup has to be maintained for 7 days. Then after, you can copy tags from volumes, like whenever snapshots will be created, you can copy tags from volumes, and those tags will be implemented on the top of your AWS snapshot. Now if you want to have additional tags enabled, now this is a particular service which is known as fast restore. Fast restore means if you need to create an AMI, or if you need to create a volume out of that particular snapshot, so that will be a little faster, but additional charges will be applied. Okay, so now you can read your policy summary. This policy will create consistent set of snapshots for each instance that are tagged every 1 hour starting 9 p.m. UST. Snapshots will be retained for 7 days. For example, if you are taking a snapshot every 1 hour, so it means there will be 24 snapshots within a single day. So 24 into 7, you can calculate the number of hours, somewhere 144 hours. So 144 snapshots will be there for a single instance. That is how it is going to work. You can enable this policy once you create it. So for sure, snapshots creation will be started automatically. Fine. So let me create this policy. If I need to modify this, so I can easily modify it without having any problem. So yes, I'll go here, I'll select this policy, and whatever I want, like I want to modify or delete it. So I want to modify, for example, I want that this policy should not be running every 1 hour. I want this to be like every 4 hours it should be running. Then after like the particular policy will be running at this particular time. Interval is not going to be 7. Interval is going to be maybe 1 day. So it will take backup of 1 day only. Fine. Moreover, 1 week, 1 month, so whatever you want, it will perform it as per your modification. So for example, as I have modified it, maybe let's say I'm going to select it 12. So this particular thing will be modified. Once I will update it, so every 12 hours, 9 p.m. 9 a.m. UTC for 1 day remaining. So whatever you changes here, whatever changes you make here, so that will be reflected under this policy summary. So this is how you can update and you can maintain your backup. So is this the question which you were asking?
Yes, I got it. Yeah. We don't, yeah, I'm having one question. We don't have region there to select which region it has to back up.
So this particular service is regional. Like wherever, like I'm working with Ireland, so there will be an additional service within Ireland region. If I'm working with North Virginia, so there will be one separate tab. Actually, this is covered under EC2 section. This life cycle manager is a part of EC2 section. So whenever you are talking about EC2, so automated backup creation is default enabled here. Okay.
In the modification part, can we change the region if required, or else it is fixed region? Once we select, our, can we able to change?
No, because see, wherever, okay, let us say that you created a machine in this particular region in Ireland. So the backup of Ireland will be created in Ireland only. Neither you can change the like snapshot location, nor you can change the lifecycle manager location. So wherever your machines are running and wherever you are just going to initiate backup policy. So at this within same region, you will go and you will have to configure it. For example, at the time of machine creation, obviously you are given this particular choice to select the region. But first of all, you have to select the region. Only after that you can work with it. In the same manner, wherever in whatever region you have selected, so after selection of your region, you can enable backup policy. It is not like once you go to like lifecycle manager console, after that you can get a like backup policy region selection option. That's not going to happen. Okay, this is
Okay.
regional service actually. First of all, select the region, then you will have to work with it.
Hello.
Hello, yes.
Yeah, I have one question regarding the snapshots. So,
Mhm.
is this a common practice adopted by the organizations to maintain the snapshots? Because it will be expensive, right? Because it's going to have the same volume as EBS.
Yes, it is going to have.
Okay, that in that case, you'll be taking the snapshots for every 1 hour.
Yes,
Then
yes.
there
Let
will
me tell
be.
you that. So what happens here is like, okay, let's continue with AWS only today, not a problem. Okay. So when we are talking about AWS backup policy, so first of all, let me tell you, there are different components where we need to take backup. First of all, like EC2. So when we are talking about, like, let's say there are 4 different type of servers. First of all, your database. Second one is your maybe front-end servers like Nginx. Third one, your maybe your application server, that could be Tomcat, WebLogic, JBoss, or whatever. Fourth one is like a caching server. For example, that could be Redis, that could be Elasticsearch, or that could be any other one. Fine. Now, when we talk about taking backup, so if these are database servers, so database servers are really critical. So we have to take backup every hour. Every hour we need to take backup of. Fine. Then after, there are 2 ways to take backup. Very first thing is like you can take backup every hour. You can take backup daily basis, or you can take backup weekly. Now, how will you define it, that what type of backup you will take on what frequency? If it is your web server, so you can take backup every 1 day, because if your web server goes down, so you have the configuration files and you can easily recreate the web server without having any problem. Which means if it is web server, so backup can be taken once in a day. For example, if it is a database server, so backup has to be taken every hour. although it will be expensive. But when we are defining the backup policy of any organization, for example, if any organization which is ISO certified, if I talk about India, so if that organization is ISO certified, so there has to be policy for everything. Maybe for policy for creation new infrastructure, policy for maintaining security, policy for vulnerability and like patch management, policy for your DevOps, topologies, like what sort of work DevOps is going to do, policy for access management there has to be. So there is a policy for everything. Fine. In the same way, when we are talking about that it will be expensive or it will be bearable. So when we talk about AWS database backup, so by default, whenever you say that backup will be taken every 1 hour, so that has to be part of your backup policy. Moreover, it is defined within your backup policy that for how many days you will have live backup for. So for example, if I have to define here, so I can define here that I will take backup like snapshot of this machine every 1 hour, and I will retain the backup of last maybe 7 days, maybe 15 days based on my company policy. And I will have to bear the cost of that backup as well. I cannot do anything within that because that is demand of my company backup policy. It could be possible that someone can ask you during interview, so will it not cost a lot? So you will have to reply there very sweetly that cost is a different thing. I agree that there will be cost, but as per company backup policy, we have to maintain that. So now there will be a question that who defines the backup policy? So backup policy is not defined by the organization itself. See, like whenever we are working with such an organization which is product based and there is no money invested from the side of investors, then there is no need to have these sort of backup policy, like SOPs, like OLA, SLA. There is no need to have a definition for all these. But whenever an investor starts investing fund within your organization, so just to show them, just to prove them that you are working at industry standard, so there will be some auditors, maybe internal auditors or maybe external auditors. So those auditor comes, they explain best practices to your investor and to your organization owners. Then after they guys sit and decide that what is going to be your backup policy. So this is how backup policies are defined. So it is not a single person that he was just sitting and he said, okay, let's take backup for a week. That does not happen. So the frequency of that backup, maintenance period of that backup, and RTO and RPO. RTO means recovery time objective and recovery point objective. Everything has to be in written format, and that has to be shared with your all investors as well as those auditors who are auditing it, then the particular team who is working on it. So everyone has to maintain the things. This is how your backup policy is defined.
Okay, got it.
Am I clear on this?
Yes.
So once again, you will have to say that cost matters, but as per the company backup policy, we have to ensure that these many backups are available all the time. Now the person can ask you that how do you manage these backups? So either you can like mention this lifecycle manager thing there, or there is one more tool which is dedicatedly designed for backup purpose only, like AWS backup is the tool. So right now you were seeing here that I was able to create backup of EC2 machines only. But right now what I can do here is like I can take backup of multiple components. Like I will have to make a backup plan. Then after I will have to create on-demand backup. Then after I can restore backup. These are the overview of this service. Now, like if I want, if I click on manage backup plan, so I will like pick here backup plan or tag. Like if I have ever created something, like I can create backup based on tags, or like I can create on my own backup plan. So I'll create my backup plan. Start from an existing plan or build a new plan. So I will click on new. I will name it maybe demo. DEMO. Okay. Rule name. anyone, whatever you want, you can define. See, I'm just going to give you a demo, like I'm not going to create it. Frequency, daily, every 12 hour, monthly, or like custom cron expression. Fine. So if you want to run it every 2 hour, every 1 hour, every 30 minutes, so you can do it. Then after, transition to cold storage. So when it is going to happen, days after creation, weeks after creation, month after creation, years after creation. So you can define, for example, whenever your backups will be created, so this will go on to AWS S3 standard storage. So you can define a policy here that after creation of that backup, when it is supposed to be transitioned from one location to another. But guys, keep this thing in mind. I will repeat this thing at least 2 times. Keep this thing in mind that whenever you are going to change storage class from A to B, for example, you are going to change storage class from standard store to maybe intelligent tiering or maybe one zone IA. So whenever one file is copied from one location to another, so obviously the charges of storage class are reduced, but you will have to pay for the transferring that object from one object class to another. For example, if you have files, very small files, maybe you have files of 10 KB, 20 KB, 50 KB, 100 KB, and there are like million of files are there. If you transfer the file from one S3 bucket standard storage class to same bucket another standard another storage class you want to transfer, so every time you transfer the files, so you have to pay for it. You will have to pay somewhere $0.45 per 1,000 hits. Like if you copy 1,000 files from one storage class to another, irrespective of the size of files, whether that is of 2 KB or 2 GB, one file means one file. You will have to pay $0.45 per 1,000 copy paste. So sometimes it happens that you may have to pay more charges than that the charges of your standard storage bucket. So you have to ensure that the files which you are transferring from one storage class to another, so these are of bigger size. And obviously whenever you will design the backup policy, so all the backups which are being pushed to your S3 storage, so these has to be in compressed format. For example, if there is a normal text file which has a size of maybe 30 GB, so make sure that you compress it and it will be size of maybe 8 GB, maybe 10 GB. Fine. So at least 1/4 or maybe 1/3 size it should contain at the time of when it is being pushed to S3 bucket, because it will not be stored only for a day or two. It will be there for years. Maybe if you are working with such a domain which is banking or which is health, so at least 10 years or maybe 20 years you have to maintain all the records for all the transactions. So that is why I am saying here, whenever you push your backup to S3 bucket, that has to be in compressed format. For example, there is a backup policy on your server. Like this can also be one interview question, that what is backup policy, what is log rotation policy on your servers? What is log rotation policy on your servers? So you will say that we keep 7 days logs online. Now what does it mean, 7 days logs online? Like you are running on Nginx, maybe Apache, maybe Tomcat, whatever server you are running. So developer says, or the organization backup planning says, that you need to have 7 days logs on the same server where application is running, because if any time it is required to debug things, so developer should be able to read logs, or developer should be able to ask for the logs immediately. Fine. So 7 days logs you keep on that particular server, and when it is 8th day, so what would happen here is, so whenever the 8th date file will be removed, so first of all what you will do, you will make a zip file out of it, and after zipping it you will send it to S3 first, and after sending it to S3, then after the file will be deleted. So you can set a custom cron for this. Maybe you can do it by your log rotate D, or maybe you can have a custom cron which will push logs to first of all S3, then after delete the file. Now there can be a question that why we cannot push the logs at the very first date whenever it is created. So see, the reason behind here is, when we are talking about that, why we cannot push the logs to S3 bucket at the very first date. So the answer here is, why do we need to pay 2 times for the same data? For example, if I push the logs onto S3 bucket today, logs will be lying there for 7 additional days, because logs are going to be deleted from the server on 8th date. So why do I need to keep the same data at 2 places for 7 days? If I have my backup policy really robust, which means very aggressive backup policy I have, so why do I need to pay for the data at 2 places? First of all, I need to have additional space on my server just to ensure that I can retain logs for 7 days. So I will need to have maybe 15 GB additional disk on the server. Moreover, if I push the logs onto the S3 bucket, so I will have to pay there as well. So this is the ideal policy designing, that when you are going to delete the logs from the server, then you need to push the logs to S3 bucket. So at least there will be an advantage of 7 days within all the data. Whatever data you are pushing to S3 bucket, so there will be an advantage for 7 days, which means like 1/4 of a month completely. So for example, if a bill was maybe $100, so you can reduce it. So for the very first month, maybe to $20 you can reduce it, which is a huge amount. Why it is so? Because it is happening every month. It is not only for 1 month, it is for every month. And moreover, like number of files should be less than that of the size of file. For example, like if you are pushing 1000 files onto server, so AWS will not only charge you for keeping the data, but for the number of files you are copying to AWS, so AWS will charge you for that as well. Keep this thing in mind. In most of cases where backup policies are not optimized, so people are paying for data transfer rather than keeping data there. If I push a file which is of 2 KB and if I push a file which is of 10 GB, so those files will be counted as one only. One means one file is of 2 KB and one file is of 10 GB. So if there is a request which is put or get, so that will be for one file only. That will not be calculated in this manner, like it is of 2 KB and it is of 10 GB. So whenever you are transitioning during the file, like you are modifying file from one place to another, and you are just changing the storage class from one class to another, so you can easily maintain the things at that moment. Okay, so we were talking about this particular, so I just wanted to ensure that you should know that how these things are planned. Whether you have a small experience or you have large number of year of experience, you have maybe 10 years of experience, so these things are common for everyone. Like anyone can ask you that how do you design backup policy, so that is why I'm telling you in common. There is no segregation that if someone has 2 years of experience, so can someone ask? Yes, because the person of 2 year experience, so the person is supposed to be responsible for setting up these things. Planning a senior person can do, but implementation should be a responsibility of like junior guys. So okay, so when it will expire, so we can define here the backup vault, default vault. Obviously, like specify the backup vault that recovery points created by the backup rules are organized in. So we can create like backup vault where our data will be saved, like copy regions, copy to regions. Like if you want that the backup which you are going to create, so that will be copied to any other region as well. For example, I said like London region, advanced setting I will go. So whatever backup will be created here, so that I can copy to some other region as well. So I forgot the name of the person who asked me the question. So will it not be very costly if we take backup every 1 hour? So my dear, let me tell you, whenever we are working with a banking domain, so there is a policy. Let me tell you, I'll not disclose the names. So there is a backup policy that whatever backup you take, that has to be in same data center, that has to be replicated in some other data center as well, because in case if your data center gets crashed, so you should have a backup. Moreover, there should be 2 different backup zones. Like if you are dealing with customer data, So you have to be really careful. So there, the same backup has to be kept at least 3 places, irrespective of cost which you are going to bear. So you have to maintain the backup at least at 3 locations. Otherwise, like all the banking regulatory systems, like as we have RBI in India, NPCI, and maybe UIDAI, so these will come and these will do what they ever want with your bank. They can shut it down. So we need not to worry about the cost. We need to worry about the particular, like the backup policy which is implemented inside the organization. So this is how you can create your backup. And as soon as you will click on create plan, so obviously it will ask you that what type of backup you want. Now there has to be a question. What is difference between backup plan and like life cycle manager? No one asked me. I'm like a little worried here. Like, are you guys listening to me?
Yes, we are listening.
So, there has to be a question. What is difference between backup and like lifecycle manager? So let me tell you, you can take backup of multiple components on the platform of AWS backup. Like you can take backup of your RDS, DynamoDB, EC2, Elastic Beanstalk, and others. So multiple components are there on the platform of AWS backup which can be covered. But keep this thing in mind when you are talking about AWS Lifecycle Manager. So AWS Lifecycle Manager supports only EC2 backup. It means Lifecycle Manager is supposed to be creating only the backup for your EC2 machines, not for any other component. Fine. So am I clear so far, guys?
So how does the cross regional backup will work? Like only master piece only will master database or master backup only will do.
So yes, this is also a question, very important thing to ask. I was coming to that point actually. So guys, sometime I just like to wait that someone should ask the question. Otherwise, obviously, I'm explaining everything. I'm not like leaving anything apart. So when you are taking backup of your master and slave, so there is no need to take backup of both. Just take the backup of master server. Why it is so? Because all the data which is available in master, so same data will be replicated into slave as well. Then why do you need to have backup of all the servers? For example, you have one master and 3 slaves. It could be the possible scenario based on the organization setup. You have one database, one master database, and maybe 4 slaves you have based on the read request. So why would you take 4 backups in simultaneous manner? Like same backup will be taken for master and same backup will be taken for slaves. So rather than taking 4 backups, just take one backup of your master server, and whenever it is required to restore, so obviously the same steps will be performed. Now someone can ask you a question that what if master goes corrupt? Because my dear, whenever your master and slave servers are in sync, both the servers are in sync, so at that particular moment, if master goes corrupt, so obviously same things will be replicated to slave, and slave will also be in the same position, because there is hardly a difference of couple of milliseconds. Most of the time the replication runs in real time, so there is no need to worry about. Just take backup of your either master or either slave server, and it is recommended to take backup of your master server, because whenever you need to restore, so it takes time to declare any server as a master rather than declaring it as a slave. So first of all, we need to bring the master up. Fine. So that's the thing. It means we need to take backup of only master server, and the frequency should be depending on the particular backup policy which you have in your organization. So am I clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
On a
sir.
daily basis, how many times we will take the backup of the RDS or any like a EBS volume on the regular, like a typical project like a.
Yes. And the backup policy has to be defined by the organization and the particular vendor and the particular partners. So whosoever part of that organization. So based on the organization standards.
Okay.
Yes. So now I'm going to tell you a couple of other questions related to like EC2. That what could be the question? That very basic questions. Guys, please mute if you are not speaking. Very basic questions we have. I am not going to like teach that how does AWS work, but the particular like key points from the AWS I'm going to discuss with you. Moreover, I would like you to please study the AWS. Why it is so? Because when we are talking about AWS, so it means AWS is not really a small thing. AWS is increasing day by day. Multiple new services AWS is like AWS keeps on adding. So the very first thing when we talk about AWS, so do you understand this particular dashboard?
Yes, we
Yes,
understand.
yes.
Ah, fantastic. So what is elastic IP address?
It's
Uh,
like a DHCP reservation IP.
which is a public access to the servers. AWS provides elastic IPs to the servers, static IPs.
The
Okay.
private, private IPs, it's static. Because what that means is that when you go in and for example, if you have an instance and you, for example, you shut that instance down, you're able to restart that instance with the same IP, unlike a dynamic IP that if you shut that instance down with a dynamic IP address, the IP address changes. But with the elastic IP, it doesn't change. It's static.
Yeah, fantastic. Very beautiful answer. Great. So now let me ask you one more question. Why elastic IP gets chargeable when it is not in use? Why it is so? Means why does AWS do it? That when
Because
it is not,
AWS has a limited resources in the part of elastic IPs, I think.
Um,
Your instance is still running on the elastic IP address. That is the reason they charge you.
no, if
no,
elastic
it's not
IP
running.
is associated with such a resource where elastic IP address is associated and resource is running, so it is not chargeable.
It is limited. They have limited. Don't they have limited in store? That's why come they don't. What's the answer? How would you answer that?
If you are not using, someone can using the IPs.
So actually, let me tell you in a very nutshell, in a very small manner. So AWS does not want, because as we know that most of the cases, like 99% cases, whenever we assign one elastic IP address, so we get only IPv4 address. Fine.
4, 5. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
IPv4 class we get one IP address of. So as we know that we are running out of IP addresses. So we are using, sometimes we are using subnetting, sometimes we are using like CIDR values, we are using, sometimes we are doing VLSM, sometimes we are doing subnetting, supernetting. So multiple components and multiple things we are doing just to save the IP addresses. So AWS just wants to ensure that there should not be any wastage on the top of elastic IPs. Like for example, if AWS does not charge you, so what would happen? Like you can block more than 100 public IP addresses within your account for nothing. So
Right.
AWS just wants to ensure that there is no wastage of public IP addresses within any user's account. And if they are utilizing it, if they keep this blocking within their account, then they will have to pay for it.
Okay.
There is very small fees for it, but yes, there is. And okay, let me tell you, if you associate one elastic IP address with the running EC2 machine, then there is no charge. Whether you are running for the one complete calendar year, there is no additional charge for that. But if you stop the machine only, then it will become chargeable, because right now you need not to have that elastic IP address in your account. Okay, now let's come to a snapshot. So for example, Okay, what is difference between snapshot and AMI?
AMI is a bootable and snapshot isn't bootable.
Okay, good. So do you know what is AMI?
Yeah, Amazon machine image. Mhm.
Yeah,
Oh, fantastic.
which is configured with a some images are pre-configured or some images comes only OS operating system.
Like a template. So
Yes, it means an AMI is a pre-configured operating template which is bootable.
yeah.
That's it. Okay. Now let us talk about that. How do you select instance type? For example, I need to have one instance where I need 2 CPU and 4 GB of RAM. So what type of instance will you select? Anyone,
It's
whosoever.
depends on the what is the purpose you are using. If you are gaming purpose, you can use a more compute optimized CPUs, and if
My
you are
dear, you did not listen to my question properly. I agree. I respect your knowledge, not a problem with that. But my question was, we need to have only 2 CPU and 4 GB of RAM. And when it comes to gaming, so FPGA are there, GPAs are there, different type of devices are there which we can use. But 2 CPU and 4 GB RAM will not work for gaming.
True.
yes.
Fine. So I want to understand that if you are working as a solution architect within your organization, and if someone is trying to ask you for the cost optimization, because when, as of today, I can see when the people are being hired, so they are asked this sort of question as well. Okay, I have like these so many servers running, and I need to go for optimization. I need to optimize the cost. So there are two things. First of all is cost cutting, and second one is cost optimization. We discussed this last time as well. So right now we are discussing it because which is why, like, cost optimization means that we should not pay for the resources which we are not utilizing fully, and cost cutting means whether that is being used, that is useful, but we don't want to have that just because we cannot pay for it.
Mm.
So we are talking about cost optimization rather than cost cutting. Fine. So when we are talking about cost optimization, there is a particular tool known as AWS Compute Optimizer. This is the particular tool. I hope you guys might have seen this, or those guys who are really into this particular thing. So obviously you can easily understand it. So this particular instance says, this particular type of, this particular service says that you have 100% optimized instance. It means it will let you know about all the instances that we have this instance which is optimized running on T2 micro, and these are the particular charges per hour which I need to pay for it. And obviously if I try to figure out like where it is running and what should be the, like, number of size, like how many CPUs are there, everything I can figure out here without any problem. Fine. So which means it will not only suggest that what should be the appropriate size, what is going to be charges difference. Like currently I'm running as T2 micro, but it is suggesting me to run as T3 micro, current T2 micro, and option 1 is T3 micro, where there will be a difference of these many prices. It means this will be less than that. Performance risk very low, means there is no performance risk. Number of virtual CPU will be 2 and memory will be 1 GB. So you can opt it here T3 micro machine. Virtual CPU will be 2 and 1 GB of memory, wherein it will be like cheaper than existing one. There will be a difference of within minus. It means it will be much more cheaper than existing one machine. Fine. So that's the difference here. This is how you calculate it. So what particular service you are going to use? You are going to use AWS Compute Optimizer. This particular will let you know, for example, that you are paying. See, optimization does not only mean that you are reducing the size. It might be possible that you may have 100 servers, to, maybe 10 servers are running under provision. So for example, what you will do, you will reduce the size of over provisioned servers, and you will increase the size of these servers. So optimization does not mean to reduce cost only, but to utilize your resources for which you are paying in a nice manner. So you will have to work with AWS Compute Optimizer as well. Now, let us talk about one more thing. Like it is once again rescanning it. I don't want it to rescan. Okay. Next. So when we select instance type, so what are the things which we need to consider of? What are the things which we need to take care of? So first of all, we need to go to this particular section, instance type. I'll go here within instance type. I hope that you might have seen it before as well, but though even being part of this session, so I'm supposed to let you know. So for example, I'll select here instance type. I'll select here A1, maybe large. Once again, I'll go here instance type. I'll go here T3, large. So see the difference here. T3 is small will be good enough. Okay, so it is large, it is small. There is a difference. Okay, see the difference. Let us see it here. Okay, for example, it's good enough. Just see, both the servers have two CPUs. Both the servers have like architecture of x86, and this has like ARM64. Fine. Then after, if you talk about network speed, so the particular server which is T3 small, that is going to provide you up to 5 GB. This server is providing up to 10 GB speed. If you talk about, so even cost is much cheaper than this. So you can calculate these things easily. Fine. So this particular like instance type is the particular section which you need to explore. And moreover, if you need to have some additional features available on this particular dashboard, so first of all, you can select the drop down list, how many details per page you want to see, what are the instance family, instance size, availability, free tier available, bare metal, hypervisor. So everything you can opt, you can pick it from here. Fine. So once you confirm it, so obviously there will be one additional detail like hypervisor. So whether what type of hypervisors do we have? Like we have Nitro and Zen. These are the two main hypervisor type which we have as of now today available on the AWS platform. And why it is like nil? Because this is physical server. A1.metal is a physical server which is allocated to you. If you want to have it, you can easily have, but keep this thing in mind that this is physical server because it is showing metal. A1.metal, there is no hypervisor, that is base machine which will be allocated within your account. Fine. Now let us talk about, so what are the things which you need to keep in mind at the time of booting a server? When you need to go for booting a server, what are the things you need to take care of?
What do you mean? You mean, what's the question again? Okay.
My question is, when you are going to boot a server, so what are the things you will take care of? And guys, thank you so very much for your support today. We have reached 10,000 subscribers. Thank you all.
Mm.
Okay, not a problem. So I was just asking that how do you ensure this thing that whenever you are booting your server, so how will you secure it?
Mm. Question on this.
Yes, guys. So what are the things you will keep in mind and you would like to ensure that uh, uh, How will you secure your infrastructure? How do you ensure that your infrastructure is secure?
Oh, I mean, you need firewall.
Let's not talk about firewall. Let's talk about security groups only, because we do not have firewall on the top of AWS.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, you got secure groups.
Okay.
You got secure group that is linked to the secure group is one of them. Secure. What the other one talking about? Oh my goodness, secure group is instance.
Okay, let me explain this to you. So whenever you are going to face an interview and someone asks you, okay, can you draw a diagram like how is your AWS infrastructure working? So let me tell you, 90% organization design their infrastructure at the very basic level like this, as this is written before you, as the particular diagram which I have defined. So 90% organization defines their architecture in this manner only. Fine. Now let me start with it. So this will clear your hell lot of doubts. I can guarantee this will clear a lot of doubt of yours. How does it work? So first of all, let us begin with that. When there is a user and user opens the particular website, maybe servergyan.com. So that is just one example. Although I do not have that much big infrastructure because I'm not running any like these sort of services, but yes, I would like to let you have an example of servergyan.com. So when a person opens the website in browser like servergyan.com, so request will go to Route 53 first of all, because we can say that we are using Route 53 as our DNS platform. Fine.
Okay.
So whenever request will go to CloudFront. Now what is CloudFront? CloudFront is known as CDN.
Yeah.
Now how does CDN work? So as there was a question from Karan Sharma and I kept it on hold for a while. So let me tell you that how does that work? Okay, so let me show you that how does CDN work. How CDN is set up? Let me show you that first of all. Okay, my bad. There is a particular problem with this. Yeah. So we have multiple edge locations. Like this is our AWS infrastructure, maybe in Mumbai. Fine. Now all the users, maybe users are coming from around the world. Like someone is coming from US. Someone is coming from UK. Someone is coming from Australia. Someone might come from Brazil. Fine, or maybe Ghana. So we have different type of users who are coming from different geographical region. So what would happen if a person comes from Australia? So that person will be really the fastest one to reach out to Mumbai server. If a person is coming from UK, so the person will be a little late. And if someone is coming from US, so it will take some more time to reach out from US to Mumbai server. So what happens here is we use a service known as CDN. We use a service which is known as CDN. Now what does CDN mean? CDN means Content Delivery Network. This is our CDN. CDN, Content Delivery Network. Okay, let me make it right. CDN, Content Delivery Network. How does it work? For example, AWS has its multiple edge locations. Let me make it a particular box here. Edge, EDG, edge location. Now what does edge location means? Edge location is a server which is managed by AWS and their end users like you, me, and us. Fine. So we do not have direct access to these servers. Like we cannot do anything with these servers, but these are managed by AWS. So whenever you set up the CDN, so your data is kept on these servers. Your data is kept on these servers. Fine. And this is not one. So if you talk about today, so as of today, AWS has more than 200 and plus servers, 200 plus edge locations. Maybe if you want that your users are coming from Nepal specific, so AWS has its own data center in Nepal as well to serve the data to end users from Nepal server only. So why would a person from Nepal come to Gurgaon or maybe to Delhi to fetch data when there is a particular server nearby them? Why would a person from Australia go to New Delhi to fetch the data? Why would a person from US go to New Delhi to fetch the data? So when like this server is dedicated for those guys who are coming from US, like all the guys, all the users who are coming from US, they will be served from here only. All the guys who are coming from US, they will be served from here only because this is nearby to US. All the users who are coming from Australia, they will be served from here. All the guys who are coming from Brazil, Ghana, or maybe any other country, so they will be served from here. And maybe if there is some other country, so they will be served from here, which is their nearby edge location. So this is how CDN work. Fine. Now you can ask a question that, boss, what if there is no data available on this particular edge location? So no need to worry about. If these edge locations do not have any data, so that particular request will be forwarded to your origin server. Now for the very one time, data will be fetched from origin server. Data will be cached once again here for next 24 hours, for 12 hours, for 6 hours based on your configuration. And after that, that data will be served to end user from here only for next 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, 40 hours, whatever is your configuration done here. Fine. So are we clear on CDN? Karan, are we clear on this? This was a question from your side.
Yes, you explained it so beautifully. Thank you.
How they are charged by using when we are using CloudFront? Sorry,
Okay, so
CDN, content delivery.
yeah, so when you are talk about the charges, so the charges are different. First of all, the particular data you store within CDN, the number of hits you are getting, and after that the particular size of data which you are serving per request. So there are multiple parameters based on which AWS charges. So there is no such single parameter using which AWS charges you, but there are multiple parameters like the data which is stored in CDN, like the number of countries you are getting the hit from, then after the particular traffic which is being monitored, the data which is transferred over the wire or over the Wi-Fi, wherever. So data, hits, request, and the particular like number of servers which are being used by you. So based on that, AWS charges. Okay, let's go back to this picture only. So if data is not available within CloudFront, then it will go to your caching server. So what is caching server? So caching server, we know like Redis, Varnish, Elasticsearch. So like it will be like going here. If data is available here, then it will return to load balancer, then CloudFront, Route 53, and to end user. Then after we have a load balancer here. This is application load balancer where we have multiple target groups. We have multiple target groups. Like if you know that I have a domain servergan.com, so rather than using www, I can mention here admin.servergan.com. So if a request comes, so I will place some rule here that if request is coming from admin.servergan.com, so request should be forwarded to this particular target group. Fine. If request is coming for maybe app.servergan.com, request should be forwarded here. If request is coming maybe from mobile.servergan.com, I have set a rule that if device is mobile, then send all the requests here. This particular set of server is especially designed for mobile devices because I have like some cropped image, like a small image size, optimized images I have. So I have this particular server especially for mobile devices. Fine. So what would happen if this is admin? All the requests will go here. If this is web, then request will go here. If it is app or maybe mobile, then request will go here. Now let's talk about that question which I started with, that how will you secure your servers? So first of all, CloudFront will be allowing users, because you know where you have business. For example, if you talk about me, so I have my audience around the world, so I cannot restrict any country, because if I see I have somewhere 57 countries around the world where I get traffic on my YouTube channel. So I cannot, like, if I create my website, so I will not block anyone, because as of now I am getting hits from 57 countries, and these are growing only for sure. Fine. So but if you have your business within India only, so you will allow traffic to be coming from India only. Now you can ask me a question, that what will be advantage of CloudFront when we are like serving traffic in India only? So let me tell you, AWS has somewhere 5 different reasons or 5 different age points within India itself. For example, let me name couple of places. For example only, I do not know exactly. For example, if users are coming from Mumbai, so why would they travel to Gurgaon? So the servers which are placed in Mumbai, so traffic will be served to them from that server only. If a user is sitting in Hyderabad, so traffic will be served from there. If a user is sitting maybe in Gurgaon, so traffic will be served from here. Or if a person is sitting in like central India, maybe some MP or maybe any other state, so traffic will be served from there itself. So although there will be a upgradation within milliseconds only, but obviously that will be a benefit for end customer. That will enhance the user experience. That will benefit us while increasing user experience. Okay. Now let's talk about, this is the first image. Now let's talk about security. So first of all, we have secured this particular thing here, because this particular AWS CloudFront allows us to integrate some other services. Like, very first one is web. It means web application firewall we can integrate here. Second one is we can integrate one more service here, which is known as Shield, which means if you want to allow some rules, you want to set a rule here that if a single IP address is hitting this particular more than 5 times within single second, that should be blocked. You know it well that there is no such condition that where will be more than 5 requests per second from a single IP address. Why would a person refresh the IP address 5 times in a single second? So you can block that. You can have some rules. No one will be allowed to have cross-site scripting. No one will be allowed to hit a DDoS attack on your site. So AWS CloudFront, Cloudflare, Akamai, so these are the main CDN applications which allows all these 3 things. Fine. Like enabling DDoS attack, prevention, like enabling cross-site scripting, enabling your swap and shield. So these allow it. Now first one, we have secured the things here.
Okay.
The very first point, we have secured our website here that no one will be able to send malicious traffic. We have implemented WAF and shield here. Second thing, now this load balancer will allow only port number 80 and 443 to hit the to receive the hits from here, because whenever no data will be found here, so it will send the request to this load balancer. This particular will forward the request to this particular load balancer. Fine. Or maybe this load balancer, because both are same. So this load balancer, now this load balancer will open port 80 and 443 only. Why it is so? Because port 80 works with HTTP and port number 443 works with HTTPS. Fine. Now let us say we do not have our server secured here, like we do not have SSL configured on these particular instances. So what we will do here is we will allow port 80 only to be accepting traffic from this load balancer only, from nowhere else. Getting point? We will not allow the entire CIDR value. We will allow on the security group which is associated with this load balancer to these servers, in order to ensure that port number 80 should be opened, because from where hit are going to come to these servers, from load balancer only. So there is no need to open this. There is no need to open port 80 from any other where. Okay. Then after, we can have port 80 enabled here as well and here as well. Now if there is a particular database server and we have port 80 enabled, like port number 3306 enabled on the database server, so what would happen here is, so we would allow only that these servers, maybe these are application servers which we are using, so database will be allowed, because I know very well like my organization, that my web servers directly do not interact with database. Fine. only my application servers are there which are interacting with database. So I will allow only port number 3306 for the security groups which are associated with these application groups, with these application servers. Why it is so? Because someone who is not authorized should not be allowed to access my database from outside. Fine. It could be possible that someone who has access to these servers, maybe some admin who has access to these servers, can try to hit one SQL query on these servers, and it will be really hard for you to identify that from where the query was executed. But if you allow only these servers to execute query, so it will be beneficial for you. It means it will be like an ideal way to drill it down to the RC level, that who did what, because the minimum access granting policy has always been preferred by the organizations. Fine. So which means these servers will allow traffic from this security group. This application server will allow traffic only from this particular web server, and this database will allow only traffic to be it will be accepting traffic from these servers only. Now, like we have multiple like database server, and obviously once we have proxy server, so proxy server will be interacting with these servers. So like, are we clear on this, guys?
Yes.
So this is how, when we are going to face interview, so we can design our infrastructure like this. So this is very easy. This is easy to understand, and this is easy to implement as well. Keep this thing in mind that we have auto scaling as well in place. So whenever any server is down behind this load balancer, then this auto scaling group will boot in new servers.
Are we uploading the data into the CloudFront?
Pardon?
Is any uploading data into the CloudFront?
No, there is no uploading data into CloudFront. What happens whenever any request will come from this user will hit servergan.com. So then Route 53 will send the request to CloudFront. Route 53 will assume that all the data, whatever this customer is asking me for, is stored on CloudFront. Request will come here. CloudFront does not have any data as of now. Reason being, it is just configured. Request will be sent to this load balancer. This load balancer will obviously load balancer does not have any data. It will forward request to this cache server. This cache server may be Redis server, maybe Varnish server, maybe Elastic server, Elasticsearch. So it could be anyone, because I do not want to have multiple servers here, but I want to ensure that request should be served from like caching. So request will be served from here only, and whenever the request will be served, so this CloudFront will also cache that request with itself. And once it is cached, it will be replicated to all the nearby edge locations. For example, it is coming from maybe Bengal, so that maybe some like Korea. So if it is coming from Korea, so it will be cached like nearby edge location. Fine. Once it is cached there, so if this user will hit the same URL once again, then request will be served from here. That will not be flowing to this particular flow. For example, now this user hits another page which is not cached here, so request will come here on this particular caching server. It does not also have the same. Request will be forwarded to this load balancer. Now the domain name will be checked, whether it is app.servergan.com, web.servergan.com, maybe admin.servergan.com. Finally, this user triggered or this user requested for admin.servergan.com. Load balancer has rules in place. These requests will be forwarded to this particular like target group, and obviously based on the particular type of request, it could be possible request will be forwarded to app server, then DB server, then maybe read database, maybe master database, whatever type of request it has, and it will be reverted to the same user once again after being processed. Now there are two type of requests. One is static and second one is dynamic. Static means like you have images, you have CSS file, you have JSS file. So these type of images, CSS, JSS, or maybe the HTML files, you can cache on this particular Varnish server, CloudFront, but you cannot cache the dynamic query. For example, if there is a /login page, user is trying to hit /login, servergan.com/login.html, user is trying to hit, so I will exclude that particular form here. Why? because I do not want to cache the credential here. I want that request will go to this Varnish server, everything will be bypassed, user request will go to database. Now here user's name and password will be verified. Only after that verification user will be allowed to log in. Now once the user is logged in, then same process will start working once again, that user can see the profile, fetch profile details from here only, but login hits will be forwarded directly to database server. So how does it look like, guys? Because those guys who are working in production environment, those are familiar with it, and those who are willing to understand that how do things work in real environment, so they will have to understand this diagram properly. I'm going to share it as an image with you guys, and obviously I would like that you should try to understand it properly.
If you don't mind, let me clear one question, last one question. How Golden MI deploys into the production?
Pardon?
How we deploy into the Golden MI into production?
Okay. That is not going through actually. I'm not able to attach it. I don't know how to attach. Okay, I'll do it. I'll share it on WhatsApp. Allow me to have some time. I'll do it. Okay. So there is no such concept as golden image. First of all, let me tell you, there is no such concept as golden image. AWS does not say any image as golden image. There is no silver, bronze, or golden. There is only image which is customized as per your requirement, or which is like base image which is coming from the side of AWS. For example, I created this server. Now what are the things that do I need to have here is like I need to install Java. Fine, all the application servers, whatever I'm going to use, I'll be needing Java application there, base Java image. Then after all the server, whatever I'm going to boot, I will be needing some maybe Tomcat server to be installed there. Then after I have 10 user admins, maybe Ram, Shyam, Mohan, Ghanshyam, Jack, Harry, Tom, Natasha, Susan. I have 10 different users. So all the users should be able to log into that server. So it means their username and keys must be placed on the server. Then all the additional software, for example, you have one centralized monitoring system, and you want to ensure that whenever new server is booted, new server is created, so that has to be kept under that monitoring system. So you need to have that agent installed on that machine, which you are going to say as golden machine. Fine. So when all the things are in place, you can create an AMI out of it, and whenever new service will be created, new service will be installed within implemented within your organization, you will use that base image as your golden image. Why it is so? It is pre-configured with user credential. It is pre-configured with your all the user credential, your maybe base software which is Java, your base software which is Tomcat, your base it has all the script written that whenever new server will be created, that where to fetch file from. For example, you have kept your data within S3 or maybe onto Git. So whenever new server will be created, you have a specific branch. For example, you do deployment using master branch. You have said this particular script that whenever new server will be created, so server will run one script. What script? It will go to /var www.html, and then it will clone one repository from there. So whenever server will be created, so it will have all the data available from GitHub itself. It means there is no stale data on the server. So this type of servers, if we create an AMI out of this particular type of thing, so that is known as golden image. Because this is golden for you, because you have to do nothing for this type of servers. These servers are created and these are ready to serve the traffic. Otherwise, there is no such concept known as golden image. So am I clear on that?
Yeah, clear. But how we deploy into the production?
So there is no when we talk about deploying into production, we have an AMI, we have base AMI ready. So okay, let us go here. So whenever we will have this auto scaling group, there are two concepts, like either we can configure launch configuration or like launch template we can have. So let me show you that here as well. So we have launch template. So when we will create the launch template at the time of creation, we will define that golden image here. For example, if I create a launch template, I will have to define the particular, like my template name, I will have to define, or whatever name I want. Fine. Then after, I will have to define that like tag, like search, like source template, I will have to define. Like I'll need to have one like launch configuration here. I'll need to have, and within that launch template, I will define the base image. Let me show you that as well. Where will I define it? Okay, just a moment. Oh, it's 9:30. I didn't get to know. Actually, I thought of discussing Git and Jenkins today.
Yeah, you did.
But actually, in fact, it was interesting today.
That's good. Yeah, yeah, that's good. EC2. Yeah, that's good. It's okay. Yeah, there's some EC2 concepts. That's good.
So like it is create launch configuration, and over here I will like pick that golden image from here. So whenever auto scaling group will create a new server, that will use my base image, whatever I'm going to create or whatever I have created.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, sir, actually, I have last question. So, you said the CloudFront is working outside the VPC. So, exactly where it is working is web application firewall along with the CloudFront or outside the CloudFront? In image, what you say?
Okay, now let me tell you this thing as well. I was coming to that point, but not today, in tomorrow's session, because tomorrow once again we are going to discuss this image only.
Okay.
So either you can integrate like web, it means web application firewall with load balancer, or you can integrate that with CloudFront. So both the particular application allows you to integrate that particular like web and this particular. Fine. So we need to ensure that where the which service is going to be deployed. So either you can enable WAF with load balancer, or you can enable WAF at CloudFront, but you need to enable at one place only. It's not required to have that WAF and shield rule like with all the components.
Okay.
So whether you can implement it here or whether you can implement it here. Right? So
Okay.
any question, guys? Now, first of all,
so what exactly launch configuration is?
Pardon?
So launch configuration. What is it?
So when we configure auto scaling group, so when we are defining that what image we are going to use for creating new servers, so that is known as launch configuration. The template of creating new instances is known as launch configuration. Not a problem. During auto scaling, we will discuss this thing as well, because we have a couple of questions out of auto scaling too. We will discuss it tomorrow.
So okay.
So well, thank you everyone. Thank you for the time. I hope this has been informative, and we will continue AWS first. Like we will